Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I am Maren Scholing, Head of Stakeholder Engagement at the Geneva Marco Labs, and I welcome you in the name of the whole team to our today's online talk, which will be on COVID-19 and fake news. I will be moderating this webinar and present to you our speakers in a minute. But before I do so, let me first thank all of you for tuning in. The Geneva Marco Labs, as a think and do tank, is all about collaborating across silos and bringing leading minds from all sectors together. And for this reason, we have designed our weekly webinars in a way that allows you to participate actively. We will first listen to two short 10 minutes presentations from our distinguished speakers, and then we will have about 30 minutes for an open discussion. Please make use of the chat and post your questions while our speakers present. My colleague, Robert Zapfel, our entrepreneur in residence, will lead through the Q&A session, and you are more than welcome to directly address the speakers with your questions. This is an excellent opportunity to exchange insight and learn from each other. Our aim is to inspire you, challenge, and ultimately win you to join our community and support our efforts in order to accelerate impact towards the sustainable development. So let's have a look at our agenda. Please ask to share the screen. Wonderful. So our first speaker will be Lukasz Bochenek, and he is the Managing Director of International Strategy at Leidar, Switzerland. He's a published author and a seasoned speaker at international conferences. He supports international companies, organizations, and NGOs in developing effective engagement strategies, processes, and measurement frameworks. Lukasz will discuss with us why right now is the time to rethink and restart public affairs. He will share with us his expertise in omni-channel advocacy and communication ethics, looking into how to navigate an ESG agenda-driven environment. And our second speaker, I hope we can reshare this the agenda. Our second speaker will be Magnus Jones. Magnus is the Nordic Blockchain and Innovation Lead at Ernst & Young Tax and Law. And he will detail how blockchain technology can help to fight against fake news. I'll say a few more words about Magnus before his presentation. And now I'm handing over to you, Lukasz. The floor is yours, and we're looking forward to what you have to say tonight to us. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Good evening, and thank you for joining. So today, really, I wanted to look at the lobbying, advocacy, and public affairs from the perspective of looking beyond the pandemic, because what we really believe is happening right now will define the success or failure of the organizations in the future. Because what we are seeing right now is that the stakeholder engagement landscape is really evolving, and we are seeing even more accent on the trust towards the organizations than companies than ever before. And corporate reputation becomes the most important currency. So all actions that we are taking right now will be really defining how we are seeing the environment in the future. And this is because we are facing right now what we call a perfect storm. And perfect storm is a concept in the meteorology, which is saying that it's the combination of unexpected events that are leading to an event of a great impact. And we are seeing this perfect storm that goes beyond the pandemic, because what we are seeing here is a pinnacle of different social and economic and the business issues that were already present in the past. However, the combination and the amalgamation of what happened because of COVID-19 is making us seeing this huge impact. And again, this huge impact, which is reshaping the business environment right now. If we can move forward, I somewhat cannot move the slides. Thank you. So what we see also this week is that the levels of discontent are extremely high, and the society is really moving towards this new dynamic where people want to see the action and want to see the action right now, and the level of this discontent will be again shaping the vision of how people are perceiving the companies and the organizations. And again, how they are shaping their discourse right now will be defining their future reputation. At the same time, the governments are being stretched by the requirements from the society, also from the voters. So therefore, the regulatory environment is moving much faster than ever. And we have to take that into consideration, because our traditional ways of communicating or managing public affairs might not be working extremely well right now, because we might be too slow to react or too slow to build our position, and then the framework has moved already. So we have to have this agility and reactivity in our planning and in our thinking of how we shape our advocacy and engagement strategies. And we cannot really wait for things to happen sometimes. We have to take decisions and take the positions and build those positions as organizations much faster than we would do it traditionally, and possibly skipping some of the intermediary steps, because agility is what will define whether we are able to manage this situation or not. And recently we did a little study looking at the aspects that are bringing these elements of the perfect storm together. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic is one of them. We are also looking at the economic downturn, and we looked at economic downturn on the dual level. So there is the economic downturn that is caused by the pandemic, but also we've seen at the end of last year that with the industrial production going down, etc., there was a slowdown of economy that was coming, that was yet accentuated much more by the curfew and by everything what happened around COVID-19. Then we also look at the sustainability concerns and climate change, and then the issue of political stability, which is extremely important in, especially in Europe. And we want to see that really beyond the Brexit discussions. And when you look at this, all of those aspects, you will see how those issues are actually interlinked between themselves. It's almost impossible as an organization to think about your COVID response without thinking about your sustainability or ESG strategy, or about how you are engaging with the governments and building the context of political stability, or how you are building the economic. So it's really important to see that holistically, because the management right now of your engagement strategies needs to take into consideration all of those aspects, and especially more so the aspects of sustainability. And we are seeing that at the regulatory level, and integration of the sustainability and ESG agenda into the post-COVID-19 recovery plans. We are seeing that at the emotional level, so from the expectations from the consumers and from the society at large. So we have to really take that into account and build those holistic approaches, because focusing only on the issues and only on the issues that are hurting us right now can have very negative consequences in the future. And again, that brings us to the point about the lobbying and influence. We have to make sure that this lobbying and influence is looking at the long-term organizational development and not only the issues that we are facing in the now. However, the whole landscape has also some opportunities, because after any storm, there is this calm waters that are waiting, and the blue ocean, if we want to refer to the business theory, because any shakeup of the economy and stakeholder landscape also creates the opportunities. It creates the opportunities for new ways of engagement. It creates opportunities for those who manage it well to really be able to build lasting relationships with those who matter. But in order to do so, we have to really manage well the influence and our lobbying activities, because as organizations we might be tempted to do a bit of what is called now in Brussels regulatory environment corona washing. So basically addressing the old issues that we had as industry or organization and giving that a corona label and asking regulators to act on it. If we do that, then we are risking to lose the credibility in the long term. We might have some short-term wins, but in the long term, we will be losing on the credibility and on trust, and that can be really detrimental from the organizational perspective. And we are also facing this new influence, and the new influence coming from the more engaged civil society, more engaged individuals, that at the same time need a seat at the table where decisions are being taken. So again, as communicators and as advocates, we have to see this balance between looking for the new ways of engagement, but also looking at the platforms where decisions and the laws are actually taken, because that's what is impacting our organizations at the end. So from that perspective, we believe that there are five things that that the organizations need to really take into account and do right now in order to be effective in order to influence this landscape. So first of all, what is really important is to benchmark our organizational priorities against the risks that are happening in the external environment. And it's really important that we have this understanding of the balance of what we want to achieve versus the risks that are represented out there. Just before the pandemic, we developed a study that was looking at the types of risks that are present in the global companies, and it was revealing that actually the new risks are human, and the new risks are related to labor and to the human issues. And we believe that pandemic even strengthened that message and make it even more visible. Then we really have to understand the stakeholder landscape and perceptions. And a lot of advocacy and communications is based on assumptions, and everyone is expert in their stakeholder environment and everyone knows their stakeholders. But on the other hand, when you are actually doing in-depth analysis and research, you are seeing that the perceptions of the organizations are frequently different to what we would think people think about us or our industry. That leads us then to the influence. So we need to really afterwards develop powerful and holistic narratives, because the organizations who develop those narratives have power to transform the industries and their operating landscape environments. Then we have to really make sure that we leverage what is here to stay, and we build that through integrating the ESG into the agenda further. And this integration of ESG requires us to look again at the influence from a very holistic perspective, because traditionally we would look at different organizational functions, so the public affairs, advocacy, communications, marketing, and sales in the silos. But at the end of the day, and right now we see it much more, we have to make sure that we have this coherent and consistent message across all the channels and all the touch points. And that's what we would call the omni advocacy. So making sure that our advocacy is not only addressed to the traditional advocacy audiences, such as regulators or what we would call stakeholders, but we also have the same message towards the consumers and all the other groups that are important from our organizational perspective. So that a couple of conclusions from that. Lobbying and influence, short-term actions will have long-term implications. We cannot think from the perspective that we need those wins right now without thinking about the consequences in the future, because we don't want to shape a perfect regulatory environment for our company or industry and then have no customers afterwards because we lost trust in the process. We also see that COVID-19 modified certain perceptions and behaviors, but there is a question to what extent those are really long-term changes, and that will need to be really researched and monitored for each organization and for each company. Right now, everyone is an expert in futurology and everyone is able to predict post-COVID behaviors in the society, but the reality is that we don't really know. So it's really important to have this monitoring of the sentiments going. Then the emotional aspects of communication are more and more important from the brand perspective. We need to really consider this emotional aspect when we are communicating with all types of stakeholders, because especially right now when people did feel more vulnerable, this emotional connection and emotional attachment becomes crucial. Then the trust, as I mentioned, becomes definitely a new currency, and reputation is the most tangible asset for businesses. And it's interesting to see that shift, because what used to be considered more as soft part of engagement becomes really the core for the organizational survival and future success. Then the advocacy itself needs to be based on the true insights into stakeholder landscape. We cannot assume anymore. Right now, there were so many perceptions that were shifted for so many companies and industries that in order to be effective advocates, we have to see what are the insights that we can gain to that landscape and what are the perceptions of the industry, because perceptions are even more important than the facts right now. We need to understand how we are being seen. And then the powerful narratives, they can transform the organizations. And we see that in many examples where organizations that embark on this ESG journey they afterwards transform their businesses and they are able really to have that long-term impact. So at the end of the day, we are facing a perfect storm. However, the perfect storm is also a good opportunity to rethink and restart what we are doing as organizations, because that gives us a new opportunity and new opening with the broader groups of stakeholders. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lukasz. That was fantastic. And thank you that you also shared your contact details on your last slide. I'm pretty sure that there will be a couple of participants who really want to get in touch with you. Yeah, thank you, Lukasz. I think you've captured really well some of the key drivers of public demand and perception. And in this regard, I would like to highlight to our distinguished audience that you have co-authored a paper that you just showed on your first slide of representation. And this paper you've called The Storm Navigator. And I think you present really well in this paper the methodology, how to facilitate the right decision-making for a future for all of us. Now, one of my favorite quotes in this publication is, "We need to prepare for business as unusual." Now, business as unusual can be supported by adopting emerging technologies like blockchain, which we cover as a core theme for sustainable development at the Geneva Macro Labs. And this brings us well to our second speaker, Magnus Jones. As I've already mentioned, Magnus is the Nordic Blockchain Innovation Lead at Ernst & Young. He's also an experienced lecturer and international speaker within digital trends and technology. His list of affiliation and board membership is quite long, so can't name it all, but let me highlight his membership to the Norwegian Computer Society Group for Blockchain, the Alpha Blockchain Cluster, and the European Legal Technology Association. Magnus, we are now really looking forward to your presentation, how blockchain can help to fight infodemics. How can we trust information that we read, as fake news and disinformation are all present like never before? Magnus, what are your thoughts? And the floor is yours.
So today we're going to talk about something that has become a fast-growing critical issue for the news publishing industry in the last few years, and specifically now in the recent part with the pandemic that we have. And this is quite critical to the news industry in general, because it's about the pillars of the quality there, and that's about the origin of news and the reliability of the sources, and that is being questioned these days. So before we dig into this, I'm just going to briefly say a couple of words about EY and blockchain, so we have some credibility towards what we're talking about, because there's a lot of hype around this. And at EY, we have more than 300 core blockchain developers spread among the whole world, with more than 14 core blockchain hubs, and we have more than close to 1,000 consultants who has an in-depth knowledge on this area. So this is an area that we really are focusing on and doing a lot of work with it. So that's just in brief about what EY does within this landscape. So back to the fake news issues. And we all know that false, misleading, and misinterpretation information could cause harm. And we've seen that recently. One thing is for the media company that their reputation can get tumbled with, but another is things like when rumors get out there that 5G is the cause of a virus, for example, and people are actually destroying critical infrastructure based upon such things. So question is now who to trust and what to believe. And we saw at a recent study in 2019 that almost 44% of people admitted that lately their trust in media had declined because of fake news. So the question is then, can the magic blockchain thing save us towards this? And we're not going into detail today about how this non-editable, decentralized blockchain database thing is working. It's difficult for people to understand, but we will try to explain here how it can add some added value towards this without becoming too technical. So the keywords towards this is immutability, transparency, and security. So we teamed up with ANSA, the largest news agency in Italy, to try to create traceability towards the news. And ANSA, they serve more than 24 Italian newspapers and have offices all over the world, and is among, I believe, the top 10 news agencies in the world. So they're quite large. They have struggled with fraudulent use of their brand for a long time. So we created something called the ANSA check that you can see on the green box there. And in brief, that is a digital verification item that is added towards the articles. So you can actually verify where it is. It's a digital label or a stamp of approval you can think of. So now readers, they can actually trace a news item back to its primary source and compare the news they read on that news source with the original news item published by ANSA. So how does this work? Well, we created this on our EY OpsChain platform, a blockchain platform, and are using the public Ethereum blockchain for this. And this platform solution is then run and controlled by smart contracts. What does that mean? Well, a smart contract is by nature not neither smart or necessarily legally a contract, but it's a script that executes and does what you want it to do, if you have coded it correctly. And there's also a couple of other interesting features there that we will look into, but that's in brief what the blockchain does here. So we use a digital object here to create an encrypted string of the news. So i.e. the news articles is linked from the original source to where it is published and so on. So when a news article is filed, a so-called hash, you can think about that as a digital fingerprint, a digital stamp of that verified text that will be recorded on the blockchain. And once the article is published on the website or some other platform, the text will be so-called rehashed and compared with the existing hash of that article. So then ANSA, they check things like time stamping of when the news article has been published, the date and time. And we have more technical stuff like the transaction hash, the block hash, block height, ID, publication events, etc. We're not going into technical details, but it means that if that data originally matches with the ones that is published, then that news article can be published with that green little link that you can press to verify that on the public blockchain. So this news provenance solution will then allow the reader to see the full history of the news and its primary source, i.e. where the news actually came from. And it will also bring together news publishers, web agencies, and other players in the journalism ecosystem into then a trusted ecosystem. And it will also enable ANSA to keep track of the use of its news and protect its name by so they can actually follow where the news is published. And ANSA's objective here is to strengthen the bonds of trust between organizations and its reader and customers, of course. So now they can track the origin of the news and at the same time support the professionalism of the journalists. So having said that, is this yet another use case where you pour the magic blockchain thing over it and say sparkle, sparkle? Is everything solved by doing this? No, not necessarily. This is a start, and ANSA has been very clear on this, because it's elements that will be added towards this platform. And at the moment, it's right that many of you might think ANSA is just verifying themselves, i.e. this platform doesn't confirm if the journalist has written something that is right or correct, but it confirms that the news source is coming from ANSA. Hence, you will have to trust ANSA in general, that they provide you with real news. So it cannot do some magic things like it's checking up that the journalist actually has written the right thing, but it is a stamp of approval towards that at least it's not ANSA's articles that is being distributed and corrected with and tampered with. So they have a control of that. So if you trust ANSA, then you can at least be ensured that the news that you read from them has not been tampered with. So this is then also something that they will elaborate further on. So at the moment, it's within their news distribution system, but they're planning also to include this further to social media, as we could have more trusted stamps there. That's for sure needed. So if the people in the social media are actually willing to prove it, it can be included and expanded towards that. We can also add the journalist signatures, i.e. so you get a more trustworthy source towards who has actually written it, who has produced it. And also we can include it to cover images. And that's also quite interesting, because we've seen actually a lot of different use cases around images where you can prove things. And I think one of the most interesting things here that we will see is rather that when an image is used, one thing is that we need to be ensured that it's not being tampered with, i.e. that the photo is actually real or the video is real. But also if you could include a payment here, and that's an interesting thing for the whole industry, i.e. that the blockchain enables that you can actually transfer micropayments. So i.e. when your image is displayed in a news article, you as a photographer can be assured that actually you get a payment directly by the smart contract that will transfer a payment to you. So in relation to that, at the moment, we don't have any official central bank digital currency that we can use for this, at least for the purpose of the smart contracts on the Ethereum platform. But we can peg it towards this, and we can create the ecosystem towards this already today. And we have seen parties out there. There's a Swedish company called Inigo Time who is doing time stamping on this. Kodak is working on this. Lots of large actors are using and working on this area. So that's a lot of very exciting things that can be added into this platform in an ecosystem that may scale. So this platform is not only about sort of verifying themselves, but they're planning to expand this and grow the ecosystem further. So by that, I believe my time is up, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn also afterwards. And now I'm happy to answer any questions that the audience may have submitted.
Thank you, Magnus. That was excellent. I'm pretty sure that the blockchain and AI passionists among us will definitely have a couple of questions for you, in particular when it comes to connecting AI and blockchain with each other, which seems to be very powerful to connect several emerging technologies. And something that I like as from your conclusion was that connecting all stakeholders together is really a precondition to build trust within the whole system. So that goes along with what Lukasz shared with us. Robert, I will hand over now to you as you are leading us through the Q&A session. I can see that we have already a number of questions in the chat, but also encourage again all our participants to raise your hands to address the speakers directly, or to continue posting your questions in the chat. And I'll hand over to you now, Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Marion. And thank you also to our speakers for this excellent insight and speeches. Yeah, thank you very much for posing a couple of questions. I'd like to give the stage to Diego, who posted a question around facts, how they should be taken care by the governments. Diego, do you want to unmute yourself and just come to the stage?
Well, thank you so much. I am Diego from Spain, and here we have a huge debate about communications, also because all this COVID crisis with governmental communication. So just wondering if, because the presentations for companies seems to be very precise, and I enjoy it a lot. Do you think that the government should take also care of all these facts, and also if you think some of them are doing this or not? And that was my questions about. Thank you so much.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. It's an interesting and difficult question in a way, because definitely government communication right now is it's more important than ever. And what we are seeing, interestingly enough, right now is that people actually trust their national governments more than they ever trusted. And we see the decrease of trust towards the multilateral organizations and international organizations, and the rise of national government as a trust of information and of solution, so to say. So of course that gives some governments the temptation to take more powers towards themselves and communicate in a way that justifies that. And for some governments, it's a good moment to rethink some of the practices. So definitely, I think from that perspective, governments need to adhere to more or less the same principles as any organization. So thinking also that whatever they might even convince their voters to do right now in the short term, like lobbying towards the society, we can think in those terms, will have a long-term consequences on them. So it's again important to always think from the longer perspective and not only from the short days. But there is a big window of opportunity for governments to build those relationships and build trust, because right now they benefit from the highest level of trust that they've had in a long time. And by the way, it's a very typical societal reaction to a big crisis. People tend to gather around the government or the authorities during those times. So they definitely face both challenges and opportunities.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a next question from Ivan. I think you have a question posted regarding management of influence first, and that might attract both speakers. Would you like to come forward and post your questions, please, Ivan?
Sure, thanks. First of all, thanks Geneva Macro Labs for hosting this, and thanks both Lukasz and Magnus for your presentations. Very thought-provoking. Yeah, my question is I guess a follow-up from Diego's question. So, Lukasz, if I understand you correctly, your perspective was from the company side, so to speak, right? Which I think is valid, and one also sees in reality. For example, in California, companies are more progressive in some regards, for example, with the environment than the government is. So I see your point. However, what is your view on the democratic control here, and well, where do you see the traditional democratic nation states really have a positive influence and a fitting influence, and where less so?
Well, from that, thanks for this question. It's definitely the companies and organizations are taking more this stage, which was traditionally reserved towards the governments and authorities, also because of the scope of ESG, also how Sustainable Development Goals framework was phrased, etc. At the same time, the organizations that take too much of that space, or companies who take too much of that space, they actually face, I think, bigger risks and opportunities, because it's important to take a leadership in the aspects that you as a company can solve. But on the other hand, the political issues and ultimate decision-making processes are still within the political and legal systems. And I think that's something really important, that we have to see where is the border of our engagement, of what we are saying, because at some point you cannot credibly claim leadership in all aspects. So you have to strike that balance, and if you don't strike that balance, it can backfire on your regulatory lobbying efforts. So there is both risks and incentive to do so.
Yeah, thank you very much. Magnus, do you have a view on this as well?
You know, I follow you on that one as well, and I'm just sorry, I'm trying to see there's lots of questions coming in here as well. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to multitask here between some screens and the challenge that we had here.
I know that very well. Thank you very much. Actually, Olivier, I've seen you've posted a question, actually 2 questions to the speakers. Can I invite you to come forward and share your screen microphone, please?
Yeah, let me grab the microphone. Now, I had a first question about back to unusual. And Lukasz, I wanted to maybe have your insight, because we spent almost 2 to 3 months saying that nothing is going to be as it was before. We're never going to revert back to the previous situation. It's going to be a new era which is coming. And, you know, I must say that since a few days, what I see, what I observe from what is around me, is that we're literally rushing back to usual, back to our back habits. What is your reading? I had sorry, just to emphasize on this. I'm still. It's perhaps a little provocative question, but I'm curious that the macro indicators at all the country levels are still the same, whereas everybody stated that nothing would be as before. Every economic or financial indicator remains the same. So how can we change?
Yeah, I think it's an extremely good question, and indeed, you know, there are probably 2 layers into that. There are people who genuinely liked their lives before more than what they lived in the last 3 months, and they want to rush to this old normal. But on the other hand, if you look at the regulatory framework developments right now, and how you know, for instance, at the EU level, the Green Deal is being even more embraced than it used to be embraced from the regulatory perspective, and from how the regulations are being shaped, also on the regulations related to agricultural sector, like for farm to fork strategy, etc. You see that actually some of those sustainability and ESG issues got even more magnified at the regulatory level right now than they used to be before. And there were some people who were claiming that as soon as we are in the economic recovery mode, the countries will just say, okay, let's forget about ESG, let's rush and get the business running. But what you can see in many contexts is actually that it is not necessarily the case. And when you look also at some of the researches right now at the consumer level, there are higher attraction towards the attributes of sustainability towards the companies, etc., on the consumer choice, because people also realized that you know that they can take different choices. So I think while there will be certain level of probably more kind of visible going back into the business and sending this signal that the companies are working on operating, the regulatory framework was moving already into that direction, and it got accentuated more. There are some industries that will get away with some of the short-term lobbying wins and getting back to the business as usual. However, the consumers have this mindset shifted, and if you look at it from this holistic perspective, so not on the pandemic but also on the economic downturn, ESG, etc., this holistic thing is shaping the future discourse and the future context. So you know, some of those short-term wins, and that was one of my, I guess, my main takeaways looking at it is we can win short-term some things, but then we can actually have the long-term losses. So that's why it's so important to balance this influence management right now between what you need to do as a business to get the economic recovery, but also what you need to do as business to have the stakeholder support that you will need in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Lukasz. In principle, I think a holistic approach is paramount, and that's the scope we should have. Our next question is from Gareth Crawford. Gareth, you have an interesting question about fake news in terms of fake and real fake. Would you like to paste that or just present your question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Robert, and thank you, Lukasz and Magnus, for your excellent presentations. We actually run a journalism program here at the Kerry Institute. We support long-form, deeply researched investigative journalism. So the idea of verification, certification, establishing a trusted source of journalistic information is very interesting to me. You know, fake news is obviously a real problem in itself, but I'm just wondering, Magnus, whether there's any data on to what extent is that problem magnified by claims of fake news, particularly by you know, political leaders. Sort of the idea of fake news squared. If someone is claiming that news is fake, but their claim itself is fake news, what is the magnifying impact of such claims, and to what extent is it a real problem?
Exactly, and I think we've seen that in many concrete examples of where Twitter, for example, has actually blocked real news as it appears to be fake news, i.e. because it has come from a controversial person or whatever, and Facebook has done the same, and there's lots of other sources. So I personally think that there's no quick fix towards this. There's no quick fix solution that we cannot say just sparkle blockchain or AI or whatever to fix this. It's more like I think it's even though that EY has created the solution, I think what ANSA is thinking about is a way to start, a way to go, because they are trying to build and create a community towards this. So if we could create more trust towards that, parties could actually verify that the information that comes from them are real, that when a quote is used, that you have a link directly towards that quote, that no one has twisted or rewritten that quote or interpreted that in a different way, and that the original source can actually then, by the smart contract, for example, be notified that a certain media has used your quote. Do you want to agree to that, or that you can check it, that you get a warning or whatever? In these cases, I think we need to grow it in that way. We cannot just we cannot restrict the whole internet and flow of information. That's impossible. So I think we slowly need to take step by step here and move in such direction.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you very much. Michele, may I invite you to post your question, please?
Thank you all Junior Macro Lab and the speakers. I have a couple of questions, very straightforward. The first one, Lukasz mentioned trust as a new currency. Actually, to me, to my mind, trust is a currency on relationship. Any relationship is based on trust. The more you trust, the better the relationship. In such a prospect, fake news and the current pandemic, the society seems to have lost relationship because the trust is going down, generally speaking. So what we as a society at large could do to regain trust and therefore relationship between us. The second point, if I may, is very straightforward. How you personally feel confident to trust algorithms or machine? Thank you very much.
Well, I can start with your last question about the trust of algorithms, and that's a good question, and it's a mixed question as well, and it all depends on what you're looking at here. If you're looking into the wide used terminology of AI, whether or not that's machine learning or what you're referring to, but a computer that thinks for itself, that's one thing, because then you're digging deep down in the algorithms of, for example, Google, that no one can explain to you, at least not by paper. It's too comprehensive, too complex. While if you look into the blockchain solution that I described here, i.e. by using a smart contract, i.e. a script, actually, as I explained, then the script is not larger than just a couple of sentences, and hence you can actually review and verify it. And that's a very important thing that we as EY, as a traditional auditing company, are having a great focus on, by actually being able to verify what's in the code. How does the code work? So we have been the first of the big four, and almost the first in the world, who has actually developed a smart contract compilator. So you can go to blockchain.ey.com now and then upload your smart contract and get it verified, i.e. does it contain any typical bug errors, does it try to do things that it hasn't been explained, etc. So we need verification of data. So I don't believe that people in general should need to learn to read coding. We cannot expect that. So hence, that's where we need not necessarily only us as the big four firms or whatever auditing firms to verify it, but I think we'll see a growth of third-party, trusted third-party companies who's in there, and that relates to everything, not only the hype of the blockchain, but if you take that as an example, say if you are to verify something onto a blockchain, like transportation of a banana, a wine, or a spare part for an oil rig, it doesn't matter if you just say, oh, I put the information into the blockchain, because that's what we call in straight Norwegian, shit in, shit out. If there's wrong information in on the blockchain, it will always come wrong information out. So hence, you will have to have someone with a sensor that can actually verify that if you, for example, transport a wine, like we at EY, we created the world's first wine blockchain. And there it is the vineyard that says, well, this wine has, for example, been stored at a certain temperature in a van at transportation. While shouldn't you have a third-party company in there with the sensor? Shouldn't you have a cargo courier company in there with a sensor in the Europallet, in addition to a sensor in the box, for example? So we have 4 different sources that says temperature was 3.1, 3.7, 3.6. And if the last one says 14.1, you have to question it. Otherwise, you know exactly, oh, it was around 3 point something. That's good enough for me. So I think we need more sources that needs to be connected towards it. It's not that we can say that we only need one digital trust. It's not blockchain that's the solution for that, not AI, not so whatsoever. And as you said, it's about sources that we trust. So while we believe and hope that people trust EY, for example, so that we could be one player who could provide services there, but I think we will see new players coming up in that market who will actually provide either physical and in combination with digital verification of digital, you can call it digital goods and services then.
Yeah, thank you, Magnus. A very interesting answer, actually. And I'd like to stick a little bit with Michele's question here, because Michaela, you also had your question was a little bit larger. Actually, you would also wanted to know a little bit about how the society at large could do to regain true relationships. And Lukasz, maybe you have an opinion on that as well. Would like to answer?
Yeah, that's an extremely tricky one. I think in the right now, what is really important when we talk about relationships, and that's always those who deal with engagement strategies. There is this question that comes: who is owning the relationship? And and I think we can build trust when we kind of realize that relationship is owning relationship, and we have to make sure that as organizations, companies, government, we can influence the discourse, but then at the end of the day, it's discourse which is owning the discourse. So we have to make sure that we are operating in that environment. And maybe provocatively, in order to build overall trust in the society, maybe we have to have sometimes less trust towards some of the information, and therefore, the solutions that Magnus was presenting will have a great impact for building the trust, because when we can start trusting the information, then we can build the better relationships, because they are informed on the right data.
Very interesting. Maybe just one follow-up question on that that just came to my mind, right? I mean, you were talking about trust to become a new currency, and when you talk currency, would you anticipate this could become more commercialized actually, and trust providers play a more important role? And how would existing trust providers, if they play a different role now, how would their roles change in the future, or have to change in the future?
Well, I think it's something you have to. In order to gain trust, you have to realize as an organization that that's again something that you don't own, that it's something that you build and that you can very easily lose as well. And as soon as this realization comes, I think there comes also realization that you cannot really commercialize it. You can do commercial decisions that lead to actions that build trust and build confidence, but you cannot really, as you never own it, you cannot really buy it, because it's again for me, trust, reputation, discourse are all those important concepts in the corporate engagement and organizational engagement that you can influence, but it's not something that you can own as an organization. And many organizations, and those who want to own it, they usually are the ones who are losing, because they take the wrong decisions and they take too many shortcuts in the process.
That's super interesting, because what you're saying is you can't buy trust, and at the same time we're seeing a lot of it's a big industry, the so-called trust industry. That's a very interesting viewpoint. Over to you, Jörn. You had another question to the speakers.
Yes, thank you, Robert. Thank you, Magnus, for your presentation. Also, I liked your comment. And I think when we talk about trust in algorithms, we shouldn't confuse AI with blockchain. AI is not really algorithms in the normal sense of the word of algorithm, of the meaning of algorithm, whereas blockchain is clear, straightforward, verified algorithm, and the one you can trust, and the other you can hope that the result will be good or not, and you can even verify it, that how the system works. So your showcase was quite nice with the verification of publications. I think it can be quite useful, but I'm in doubt that it will do anything against fake news, because currently when I read some fake news, well, some news, I'm not sure that it's real, I just go to the publisher's site and I just verify whether the publisher has actually published it. And in some cases, the publisher has altered the article later on, or has depublished the article. And in these cases, your solution can help. So it basically can help to verify that publishers have not manipulated their articles later on. This can be very useful in certain use cases, especially when you look at legal publishers. So it's a really useful solution, but I think it's not really doing anything about fake news.
No, no. As mentioned, it's at the moment only verifying what ANSA claims it to be, and as you said yourself, it's a solution where you can more easily have a source towards the original source, a link towards the original source. So I think, as you know, as I normally say, as long as there's humans and machines involved, you cannot trust it because it will be errors, whether or not that's on purpose or not, because both machines and humans make errors. So it's in the same way as within typically the track and trace hype of blockchain, where we have everyone saying, oh, we can trace this from A to B to C, but well, yeah, if it's only you verifying this on a private blockchain that you control all the nodes, how much trust is it really? So I think we just need to understand the landscape a bit better, a bit broader, and see where we are today. Can we make some efficiency towards where we are today? For example, that you pay an independent third party to come up to inspect your goods. Is that good enough? Is it the EU Commission that comes up on a control that they actually announce? Do you know that the lemons are ecological, for example, or the grapes are ecological because there's a control once a year, which is announced? Well, it could be swapped on the background, even though the label says on the blockchain that it's ecological grapes or lemons whatsoever. So I think we need to see, well, how can we make efficiencies a bit better that we have today? And it's not by turning a switch that we will solve everything with the magic AI word or the blockchain word or whatever. But I think what we see here is that we're moving at least in a right direction. And if more people or the industry would come together, join into this, or create their own solutions, so we have more sources that can be trusted, well, in the end, we might end up like, well, if you don't have such a trusted source element where you can actually link it towards, then it will be considered and classified by people as fake news, i.e. people will not read it, or presumable some people will read it because they find it very exciting when you see in all the surveys that people actually want fake news, for example, on Facebook, because it's entertainment for them or whatever reasons. But I think that's the way to move. So yes, correctly, Jørn, as you said, it's not 100% perfect, and we are totally open about that, but I think we're moving at least in the right direction of not necessarily eliminating fake news over the night, but taking small steps towards that.
And do you see an adoption right now in the media industry, maybe speeded up by COVID-19?
Well, I think the COVID-19 thing has it's a lot of people saying, well, we have speeded up the technological evolution, we've speeded up the implementation of video calls and everything. But from working with this from the inside and working not only within one specific industry, but I work with everything from hot dog bread producers to oil industry companies. So it's a widespread on that. And what we've seen in the last year, I would say one and a half years, is that people and companies, everything from well-established companies to startup companies, have more or less been allowed to work a bit quietly on this area. There's not been that much fuss in the media. They have been working on this for a long time. So it's as Lukasz said also earlier, that I think we will not see a swift transaction into something. It has been an involvement that has been there for a long time, but the media in general and people in general might have not seen it while working it from the inside, like you said, on the sustainability element and everything. That's not something that is coming now because of COVID. It has been there, and for the last I would say 9 months, every project that we have touched upon has an element of sustainability. Hence, we have our own sustainability team that we bring into, regardless of what we are doing. So I think there's a thing that has been there already, not overnight because of COVID.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Magnus. Time's up almost for our webinar tonight. I have one last question, and I think it's a really good closing question from Eckhard. Eckhard, you might want to pose a question now.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, and thank you to our speakers. Very interesting discussion indeed, and sorry to run a bit over tonight. I have a question for Lukasz, and it's a bit of a broader question, basically trying to understand a bit the social impact or social transformation of what you're describing and of the aftermath of the crisis will produce obviously winners and losers. And the question is, where do you see these winners and where do you see the losers? And how can we basically make sure that this transformation will be successful, in the sense that how can we compensate the losers by finding mechanisms to basically transform this change to making everybody a winner? Thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. You know, I think there will be definitely the losers will be the ones who were already in trouble before, and the reality is that you know, that perfect storm has this cleaning potential of helping to get out those who are already struggling for various reasons, from economics to ethical ones. But I think there will be one paradox. There will be some organizations which are very happy right now, and they consider themselves the winners because they got something fixed with the regulators right now or with the society, but they might be losers on the long term because it didn't really transform. They didn't transform the thing that was causing them trouble. I will not name any companies or industries, but you know, there are some that had some issues. They got it fixed or relieved right now, but on the long term, they will be in the same situation as they were before. They took some help, but if they don't take that moment right now as an opportunity to transform and think long term, they might be actually the ones who will be long term losers. And some of those who are struggling right now but are taking the steps to transform and rethink, restart their businesses might be actually the ones in a couple of years' times who will be the biggest winners of that transformation. So I see probably these two levels here of losers. So the ones who are losers because they were already in trouble, and the ones who were not acting in a way that they would stand for it in the long term.
Thank you.
Wonderful, and I will take over from this stage. Thank you all for this vibrant discussion. I think whether we work in communications or not, or in blockchain or not, what we have been elaborating tonight concerns all of us. And indeed, I think that it was a good quote: "New risks are human," and I believe that it will be crucial that we bear that in mind, that when we compare losers and winners, we keep in mind that to any technological solution, we need to understand that the different sectors will have to work together. And because you shared it well in the slide, where as it concerns stakeholder engagement, advocacy, communication, marketing, they all have to work closer together in order to build trust and reputation in the long term. Well, Magnus and Lukasz, you did an excellent job answering such a diversity of questions. Thank you that you have taken the time tonight for our community. And thank you as well for having offered to following up via LinkedIn and social media. We will continue our weekly webinars until the mid of July, before the summer break. And next week, we will have the pleasure to discuss with you a really interesting theme about tomorrow at work with Sabina Dewan, President and Executive Director from the Just Jobs Network. She's based in India. And Eckhard Ernst, who is as well working for the ILO here in Geneva as a Chief Macroeconomic Policy Economist. And the main question will be around how could labor market look like in the future, and we will look at this from an emerging market perspective as well as from an OECD market perspective. And then the week later we will look at political risks and COVID-19, which will be followed on the 24th of June on the question how the virus shapes our digital future. And I see that the slide is shared on our communication channels. As we highlight always at the end of the webinar, our discussion does not end here. Please connect with us through the different channels, browse through our videos on YouTube, leave a comment, share with us your feedback. And for now, I wish you a great rest of the week and hope to welcome you in the name of the whole team to our upcoming webinars. Stay healthy, stay well, and let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.